Yeah, good morning, everyone. So, yesterday we learned about data binding, right? In Angular data binding. In Angular data binding, we discussed about one-way binding. We learned about how one-way binding works. And in one-way binding, we have three techniques: interpolation, property binding, and attribute binding. So we have three things. So what is interpolation, property binding, and attribute binding? What is interpolation? Interpolation is binding values by using a binding expression. Am I right? What is problem in this? It is forward only and it cannot bind to certain properties. It is forward only and it cannot bind to certain properties. Yesterday we saw checked, right? So property binding allows to handle. So property binding allows to bind. Properties are defined in a square brace. They will bind to any property, but unfortunately they cannot bind to attributes. Because in HTML, some elements have attributes and you cannot bind to attributes. To bind to attributes, you need another one. What is it? Attribute. So attribute name. We can use attr. So what is the concept of one-way binding? One-way binding will read the data from source and update into UI. Any change performed in the UI, it cannot update back. Only one direction it is going. Now how to handle both, we will see today. And what is the framework used? Actually, data binding in general JavaScript happens with a lot of DOM manipulation. But Angular will not use any DOM manipulations. Then how data binding works? By using frameworks like MVC and MVVM. MVVM I will explain. I will show you. Yesterday we discussed about which one MVC. So model represents the data, view represents the UI, and controller represents the application logic. So today we will see how two-way binding works. So we will learn how two-way data binding works. So the concept of two-way data binding. So what is two-way data binding is nothing but two-way refers to bidirectional data transfer. Two-way refers to bidirectional data transfer. That means the data present in source is binded to UI. So next, the modifications on data, in UI will update back, will update to source. This is two-way binding. That means whatever data is present in source, that data is displayed in the UI. And if any change performed in the UI, that change will be updated back to the source. Actually, two-way binding, it is managed by model. It is managed by model in MVC. Two-way binding is managed by model in MVC because MVC contains model contains data. And it is managed by the model. How it manages, I will tell you here. Actually, so we have one simple point. Generally, what happens, we have a user interface UI, or we call it as view. And we have the model. So this is the model. So model is having data. The model have data. This is model. And model comprises of data. Model contains the data. Actually, this data is updated. This data is updated to the view. The data is updated to the view. And if any change happened, so that is updated back into the data. This mechanism is called as what? Two-way binding. Now, actually, this model, how it knows the data is updated. How it knows the data is updated, how it will store the new data. Actually, model uses a simple technique. Model actually uses a concept of previous value. And it uses a concept of current value. Current value. This is the concept used behind this. Actually, suppose in the model we have name, as name is some John. That means this is binded to view. That means that is binded to view. That means here name contains what? John. So whatever there, it is John. Now, what happens is this name in the UI is changed. That means what is the previous value now? Previous value is what? John. What they have done, they made modification. If they made modification, they changed this John. In the UI, they changed it. In the UI, they changed that John and made it as David. That means now what is the current value? David. So what model will do is, this model is going to use a formula. This model is going to use a formula. The formula is previous value is equal to current value. It uses this formula. Previous value is equal to current value. That means no changes. If previous value is not equal to current value, then it is changed. This is the formula it implements in the background. That means it will verify whether the previous value and the current value both are same. If previous value and current value both are same, that means no change happened. No change happened now. Previous value is John, current value is also John. That means no change. Now, if previous value is not matching with current value, because current value came from UI and model verifies it. Model checks that previous value was John, but now the new value came, David. If previous value is not matching with actual current value, that means some change occurred. and it identifies that change occurred and it will update the changes in the source. So what is the formula behind verifying whether change happened or not? That is depending on previous value and current value. So if previous value is not matching with current value, some change happened. This is actually managed by model. This model is internally handled by, in Angular, the model is managed by a directive called ng model. Angular model is called as ng model. In Angular, this ng model is going to verify that. That is the reason. That means model contains information. Model contains information about the complete information about data. That means what is previous, what is current, whether change happened or not. The complete information about data is present in model. That is the reason technically model is called as, we call model as single source of truth. Single source of truth. We call it as single source of truth. It is very important term in interviews. So I hope you learned OOP concepts. When you learned OOP concepts, you might have heard is a relation, right? Is a relation, has a relation, right? We learned inheritance, aggregations and all. Is a relation, has a relation, single source of truth. These are all technical terms. So is a relation means inheritance. Has a relation means no inheritance, but base class members can be accessed in derivative class. How we can access without relation? By creating an object. We call that mechanism as what? Aggregation. So these are technical terms. Is a relation, has a relation. Single source of truth means it is referring to model. That means in many MNC interviews also, you will find this in the questions. They will say which refers to single source of truth. Which component handles single source of truth? That component handles single source of truth is model. Why model is called single source of truth? Because it contains the information about whether the change happened in data or not. The truth about data is present in model, whether the changes happened or not. And in Angular, who is going to manage this? In Angular, that is going to be managed by whom? ng model. So Angular model is ng model. Which is known as a directive. We will discuss separate session about directives. Will be a separate concept on directives. I will detailedly explain directives in the next concept. But as of now, what is ng model? Ng model is a directive. Actually, so it refers to single source of truth. It refers to single source of truth. That means it tracks and keeps information about the changes in data. It tracks the changes in data and it keeps information about the changes in data. That is why it is called as single source of truth. So model is referred as single source of truth. So model, you can say model is single source of truth. Single source of truth. Model is single source of truth. That is the technical concept you should know. Now here, how this works, I will show you actually. And model, remember, model usually ng model is a member of Ethernet. So you can say forms module is a member of forms module, which is defined in Ethernet Angular/forms. That means you cannot use ng model directly. In Angular, we cannot use ng model directly because ng model is a member of which module? Forms module. And it is that forms module is defined in Angular forms. So if you want to use this ng model, you have to import that module. You have to import the module. That means what you have to do is, in order to use ng model, you have to import in app.module.ts. That means we have to import forms module from Ethernet Angular/forms. And where to register all components. All the components are registered in declarations. Registered in declarations. You see, the components are in app.module.ts. All the components are declared in these declarations. And all modules must be in imports. In imports, you have to declare modules. Forms module, you have to keep it here. In the imports, you have to define. Forms module must be defined here. So you cannot use Angular model directly. In order to use Angular model, you need to import a forms module. So once you import forms module and register in app module, then you can use ng model. ng model is responsible for handling two-way binding. It is responsible for handling two-way binding. How it handles two-way binding, I will show you. See, this is very important process actually. First, let me explain it. So I will save this. Okay. And next one, these I will upload to you, right? Yeah. See, actually, suppose we are having public. So username, it is string type and some value. Now this, whatever reference you defined, it is binded to a text box. It is binded to a text box. That means here we are giving name and it is binded. Generally, how you bind that? We use input type is equal to text. And we learned property binding now. Value is equal to, it comes from username. This is how we done. Then automatically that value will display here. It will display the value here. Now when I do any modification, how it will update back? So generally, when I am modifying, the text box should notice that some modification is happening. The text box should notice that some modification is happening. And generally, it can notice only by using a concept called event. And if value is changing in any element of HTML, that event is called as on change. On change. In Angular, events in JavaScript we write on change. In Angular we write change. We write change. And Angular in JavaScript generally how we write here, input type is equal to text, and here we write on change is equal to some function. So we write some function which can be performed. We define in this way. But generally in Angular we write like this: input type is equal to text. The on change events are written in a parenthesis. In a parenthesis we write change. Later you are going to learn detailedly about events separately, but here temporarily we have to use for data binding. So one concept I am explaining. So here we define which one? Function 1. So what is the difference in Angular and JavaScript is, in JavaScript we write on change, and in Angular we write change, and change is written in parenthesis. It is written in parenthesis, right? Events are written. Now, already we discussed that Angular is using a framework inside. So that framework can identify changes without writing event. That framework can identify changes without writing any event. So, and who is going to identify the changes in data? Who is having the data and who is going to identify the changes in data? Model. Model is having the data. Model is identifying changes in the data, and model is updating the data into you. Am I right? So model is doing 3 things. It is displaying the data in the view, identifying the changes in the data, and updating the changes into the source. Right? That means now model is doing model. Who is the model in Angular? ng model. It is actually, this is actually using, suppose user name. Understood? Model is using username. Now this username must be displayed in text box. To display that username in text box, which data binding it has to use? Property binding. Na? Am I right? Property binding. That means what ng model have to do? By using property binding, it have to collect this value and display in the text box. Property binding, how the property binding is written? In square brace. Am I right? That is in square brace. That means now what happens is, by using property binding technique, it will collect the value and it will attach to text box. Now, when it will identify that some change happened? On event binding. Event binding, it will use a parenthesis. This is event binding. This is event binding. That means it will use a parenthesis, event binding. What event binding will do? It will identify any change happened or not, and it will update back into user. This is how model is written. That is how model is written. So model is written, and now this is attached. This is attached to this text box. This is attached to the text box. That means now what we do is, we simply write like this now. I will remove this now. Now simply we write like this. To to handle two-way binding, we simply write like this. What we do is we write here input type. Here we are defining input type is equal to text. And here we have to use which technique? Property binding to get the data and display. Which technique to update back? Event binding. Event binding. And who is managing these two? ng model. So ng model is going to manage this too. And where is the source? User name. From here it has to bring and update. This is how it handles the concept. So this refers to property binding. This refers to event binding. That means this value is coming and attached to text box by using which technique? Property. It will identify the changes using event binding and update back to the source. And if anyone asks like, what is this event? By default, that event is change. Understood? By default, that event is change. What is this property? By default, that property is value. That means this is attached to which property? That is attached to a property called value. But remember, it is so intelligent, it is designed in such a way that according to element it will attach. For example, our element is not input type text. Our element is input type checkbox. Understood? If our element is input type checkbox, then it will attach to checked property. It will attach to checked, not to value. That's very good. That is what framework is. Because if it is not a framework, you have to tell to which property you have to attach, when to attach. This is all internally managed. So the only concept is already everything is written for you. You just use it. Earlier we have to write all this manually. Now we are just using it. So it is using a property and attribute binding technique. By using property binding, attaching to the text box, by using event binding, it is updating back. And the property depends on element, and the event by default for every element it is change. For every element, the default event to identify the changes is which event? Change. It uses change event. That means now model is going to manage all this. This is 2. I will upload this diagram also. That means actually how it works. That means ng model uses property and event binding techniques. Property and event binding techniques. ng model uses property binding to get value from source and attach to UI. And ng model uses event binding to identify the changes and update back to source. So syntactically it is written like this. Syntactically we write like this. Square brace, this is for property binding, and parenthesis, this is for event binding. And this square brace, property can be value, property can be checked. Am I right? Like this. And event is always which event? Change. That is always change event. Now, how it works? Input type is equal to text, and in property and event binding, ng model you have to define is equal to some source reference name. That is how we need to attach. And remember here, first property binding, then event binding. Property binding and event binding. That means you cannot write like this. Understood? That means you cannot write in this way. Ng model. This is invalid. This is invalid. Why? Because event will not work before property binding. First property binding, then event binding. That means first you have to mention the property binding, then event binding. So the order is also very important. Now actually your Angular 15, 14, 15 and higher versions are very, very good in error monitoring. They are very good in error monitoring, because in several versions earlier, before Angular 13 up to Angular 13, lot of problems in UI. That means in HTML page, when you are writing, it will not show any help. Whether that reference is present or not, am I writing a wrong reference or correct reference? It will monitor only at runtime, not at compile time. This is big headache earlier. But in 14 and 15 version of Angular, they improved it. They added good error handling for even in HTML template also. Earlier we don't have. Earlier if I write wrong spelling or wrong capitalization in HTML page, it will not show any error compile time. At runtime it will show. This is a big headache. That is the reason now they improved it. Now it is very good. It is easy to identify the problems while typing itself, you will know. Right? Now see here. So how to handle this? Let's see example now. Let's go to this data binding now. In the TS, here we will declare a simple public. So username is a string and what? John. Okay, now let's go to HTML page, and here I will just keep a simple text box, some heading, some two-way binding, and here we are having some input username. I am using here input type is equal to text, and you can see I am using here square brace and parenthesis and what? Ng model, and is equal to what? Username. Now it is not working, because already we know that ng model cannot bind because it is unknown to input. It is unknown to input. So we know that because this ng model is not directly available in Angular. First what you have to do, go to app module. In the app module you have to import. Import which module? Forms module from Angular forms. After importing, you have to register. Register in which location? Imports. Here we have to register what? Forms module. In the note, I am giving only the module which we are using. Some people, they delete everything and put only that. Don't do that, right? You have to add to existing. If you delete this default module, several errors will come because lot of dependencies are present. So you should add your module to this. Understood? Many people, what they do is, because in the note I am giving only the component we are learning, they delete all others and put only that. That is not the way you have to do, right? You have to add, not remove. Okay. Now it is ready. Now it is ready. Now ng model is working fine. Now let's see here. I will put a simple heading, some heading, and here I will say hello. And for hello, here I want to display the value. I can use interpolation, right? By using interpolation, I can just display the value. What is the value? User name. That is how we are using. Now see what happens. So we are not writing any events or anything. Let's open that here. We are using it localhost, and you can see, and when I make any change in this, automatically it updates. That means whatever the changes we are making, it is updating. Actually, if I have to do this in JavaScript, we have to write one function attached to any event like on change, on key up like events. But now it is managed by simply one directive. What is it? ng model. Remember, I written ng model in the note. In the syntax, I am writing ng lowercase because originally in library it is present like this. Originally in the library it is present like this. When using, it will be used in this way. That means the class name and the reference name is different. The class name is ng model like this, and its reference name is camel case, lowercase ng model, right? So technically, when you are dealing with data binding, this is how we need to manage. That one example just I will give here. Data binding.component.ts. In that, we are not doing much. So here I will give only what extra I added here. So in that I added only this username. Only that username is added. And data binding.component.html. In HTML, I am just presenting that. I will copy this and let's present this. This is how we are using. Now here, let's take one little bit complex example to understand different elements. Let's see. We will create one simple concept here. Let's create a form. I will remove this and this data. Let's create a simple form. I am designing a div. So I will apply class as row. And here we will put a div. This is class as call3. And here again a div. This is class as some call9. And here I am designing some product, register product something. And here we are designing a data list with the data term name, and input type is equal to text. Okay, another one, here we are defining price. Another data definition, input type is equal to text. Okay, another data term is stock. I will use input type is equal to checkbox. And checkbox here I given some available. Available I am writing. Okay. And we have another term shipped to. And here we are giving a drop down select with an option some Delhi, Hyderabad like this. We are just giving some data. Now whatever here we have class form control, and here we are having class as form control, and here we have, for this I will give as class as form check input. That is the checkbox class. We have a modern look for the checkbox also. This is actually checkbox. This is actually checkbox. We have a modern look for checkbox. We can apply class form switch. Then automatically checkbox turns like this. The checkbox will turn like a switch. That is a new Bootstrap style for checkboxes actually. Now here ship to, this is class as form select. Form select, there will be a drop down here. These are all the options. Now what we want to do is, let's go here. And here I'm just giving the column is 2 roughly, or say column 9 only, right? Yeah. And here I'm adding some heading. So this is details. So that is the details we want to display there. So whatever data they are entering, we want to display margin as 4. Right. So that is very much huge. Right. Let's keep it in this way. Okay. Now what we want here, we want to display the details here. Data list, data term, this is name, data definition. Another data term price, another data term stock, another data definitions we will add below. Currently they are empty. And one more data term is shipped to. So, and here we have data definition. Now whatever details user is entering here, those details must display here. That means we need to access the data and display. That means whatever data entered in the form we need to collect and we need to display in the details. That is the basic thing we are doing. Now for this, what we will do here, see, I'm just keeping in the column. For that, first we need to go to controller. This is the TypeScript file. Here we need to declare all the properties. Now here we will learn 2 techniques. 2 different techniques we will see. Actually, currently we are using which framework? MVC. In MVC, data have to come to controller. From the controller, it is updated back. Actually, we are now using the framework of MVC. In MVC, we have model and we have view and we have controller. So we have controller, right? This controller is your .ts. This view is .html. Currently model we are keeping so directly in the controller only. We can put it in a separate location. We will see that. Initially, whatever data is in the model, it comes to controller. And from the controller, it is updated to which one? View. And any change happened in the view, it is updated back to the control. It is updated back to the controller and that updates into the model. This is actually the hierarchy, how it works. But what we can do is, this is MVC. We have another architecture instead of MVC. So we can use MVVM. Instead of using MVC, we can use MVVM. In MVVM, actually, you don't need this controller. You don't need this controller. Instead of controller, what you can do is, you can use a view model directly. View model. That means from the model you can update to view, from view you can update to model without the concept of controller. That is MVVM approach. So this is MVC approach and this is MVVM approach. I will show you both here. MVC approach, MVVM approach, how we can handle that. Initially, let's see, in MVC approach, we need references for every property. That means in the TypeScript, this is controller na. Here we have to declare what is it. So all the details here. Remember, you can use whatever convenient technique you have. That means, will you declare 4 variables, 4 properties for name, for price, for stock, for shipped to? Will you declare 4 properties? No need of that. We can create one product. It is an object type. Am I right? It is an object type. And very important now, how to define what data this object should have. We can use a contract for this. We can use a contract for this. That means now see how in real-time projects they do. First, we will go here. Currently, we are using components. In app folder, we will add another folder called contracts. We are adding another folder called contracts. And we will design a contract. That means add a new file. Contract is product contract.ts. And how to design a contract you learned. Contract is designed by using interface. I will give the name product contract. According to that, it should have a name which is string. It should have price which is number. It should have stock which is boolean. It should have shipped to which is again a string. Now this contract we want to use here. Now we have to import that contract here. So we have to import product contract. It's not available. You know why it is not available? Because it should be marked as export. We learned module system na? Right now I can use that product contract from the contracts. Now what we will do is, after importing product contract, we will create here a public product of what type? Product contract. According to that contract, it can have some data now. As per the rules, what is the data? Name. Name is empty. I given string empty. Another one, price is number, that is empty. Another one, stock is boolean, I will give false. And another one, shipped to is empty. String. That is the contract. Now I need to attach this object to the UI. That means whatever they enter, it should attach to this location. That means here now we are using two-way binding. Two-way binding, how? Square brace. In that parenthesis, what is it? ng model is equal to product. Product is an object na, product dot name. That's how we define. That is how we configure. You can individually create, but I already told you that what is the purpose of object. The purpose of object is to keep all related data together. The purpose of an object is to keep all related data together. We learned JSON, right? That means the same thing we have to do here. What it is? ng model. And this refers to product dot price. And for this checkbox, we have to use ng model in parenthesis. Now here we need to define what is it? Product dot stock. That is how we can define. For this drop down, we have to use ng model. And this is product dot what? Shipped to. These details we need to display here. Now I need to bind here. There are two techniques here. Interpolation you can use, or if I want to bind to data definition, how to bind? Is the data definition having any value property? Divs, spans, table cells, data definitions, do they have any value property? No. In JavaScript, how you display any content inside them? In JavaScript, if you have to access the data definition or a div or a span or a paragraph and display some text inside, then what property you use? JavaScript uses which property to display some content inside a container? Container like divs, spans. We have inner text. Remember the inner text, inner HTML. You can use them. That means here, if you want to bind to property, you can put in a square brace. What is it? Inner text or inner HTML. Inner text comes from product.name. Or you can use simple binding expression also. That means we can define product.price. Your wish. Here I will put stock. For stock, I will put an expression here. I will put an expression here. The expression is product.stock is equal to true. Then it should print available. Otherwise, it should print out of stock. Shipped to, it has to print. It should use product dot. What is it? Shipped. Now you can see some default data is present here. By default, some data is present here. And I am entering the name. Automatically, that names comes here. That means I am entering the price and it will get the price and display. I am selecting the stock available and switch, it is out of stock. We are changing and displaying the data, and shipped to which one you selected, it displays. That is a simple concept of data binding. That means accessing the data from source and binding to UI, identifying the changes in the UI and update back to the source. But many times people don't want like this. If you don't want like this, you have to use lot of events actually. That means generally how we want is when user is filling a form, for every change, it should not update to server. Am I right? That means you entered name submitted. You entered price submitted. No. We should wait until all details are entered. After that, we have to submit. It's your wish. You can write by using different techniques like that. That means what I will do now here is, I will do one thing. To do such interaction here, let's keep a simple button. And I say here, register product, register. And just say class BTN and BTN primary. So what I want is, I don't want here, this is the button, and button I will give W100. And you can see that is the button here. I don't want to update until or unless all details are entered and they click register. Currently what happening, I entered name, immediately updated. We don't want that to happen. I want only on this register button click. On this register button click. Then it's simple. Actually, we have to use some technique. Technique is nothing but I will go to the component. Here, one object is product and this is initial product. That is the initial product. So here I will create another object. This is updated product. Updated product. Updated product it is also what type? Product contract type. This updated product also having all empty details only. Understood? All empty details we are having. That means name, price, and all these are empty. These are all empty details we are having. Okay, that is the basic details we have. We are having the basic empty details here, right? Now, see this updated product. That updated product we will use here. That means what we are using here, product name and price. Here we will not use the direct product name and price. Here we will use updated product. Here we will use updated product. Updated product. So, and here I am using updated product. It's a stock, updated products shipped to, like this we are using. Now what happens is here you can see when I am typing, it is not updated there. When I am entering the details, it is not updating. When I am selecting here, it is not updating. So what should happen when user clicks register? These new details must be updated here. Then we have to write a event for this button, right? Generally in a class, we have to write. Can I write a function in class? Yes, sir. Noah. Yes, Noah. Can we write a function in class? We can write a function in class, but it cannot be class member. Understood? Right? Then what is a class member to define any functionality? Method. So we have to write some method, public, and I will say register click. Register click. It is a void type method. Understood? What this method have to do? Collect the data from product and attach to updated product. How to access the properties of the class inside the class using this. This dot updated product is equal to this dot what product. That means whatever data entered in product, it will store in updated product only when register click. And when this register click should fire up? On button click. For this button, we have to use parenthesis click. Understood? Because just now I explained that events we don't use here on click. We use what? Click. And events are written in a parenthesis. And which function it should call? Register click function it should call method. Now that's how it does. Now see here, I am entering the name, I am entering the price, and I am selecting stock and ship it to, then click on register, now updates. I changed stock, out of stock, it is updating. So I changed this name to Samsung, it is remote. It is doing both works now. Understood? That means we are entering some details, it will display those details. And not only that, it will update when user clicks on register. We can control that also. For that again, another logic we have to write. Such things you will see. Initially, first time when it opens, you are entering some data, it is not updated. You are entering some price, it is not updated. You are making some change, it is not updated. Then you click on register, now it is updated. So it's your wish. Actually, we will learn different events in the later stage. On click, on change, on blur, on focus, so many. Now here we are learning how to accept the data and update. This is which technique? Two-way binding technique, by using which framework? MVC. Let's see the same MVVM. Let's see the same MVVM, how we can handle. That means if you want to update directly, how the MVVM works, right? Same concept. But see, this example I will give MVC. In MVC, we will use data binding dot component dot ts. Let me copy that TypeScript code for you. .ts, copy. This is the TypeScript code, okay? And the data binding dot component dot html. I will use this binding HTML. This is the page, okay? Right. Now let's see the same example with MVC approach, how it happens. Right? We can use different approaches depending on requirement. Now let's delete here. You see, I am deleting all this logic in the controller. In controller, nothing. This is our controller, because what happened, everything should come to controller. From controller, it is updated to view. Now the controller is complete empty. Okay, let's go here. Now design is same. Just we will remove this part here, because we don't have product name. We don't have product name. I will delete this. And we have price, and we have stock, and shipped to. This we deleted. And register click also, with button, complete button is not there. Yeah. And here I am removing inner text and all the data. I will keep it everything empty. Means just the basic design what we created earlier. Now this is the design we are having, an empty one. Now whatever data entered in that name, it should update into details. Now we should not take help of controller. That means you see, we should not take help of controller. I cleaned up everything here. There is nothing in this controller. Right? You don't need a contract also here. Okay, na? In the previous example, I need to give that contract logic also, na? Right here we need, so one more, add contracts folder, am I right? And add a new file. What is it? Product contract.ts. The product contract.ts code is this one. In previous example, this, after that you can add all these, huh? Right. Now see here, this is also not required now. This is empty. Class is empty, nothing. Now let's go to UI. In the UI, you see here, for this text box, it should become dynamic. And whatever value entered inside it, we should collect. Then to make the text box dynamic, we can put ng model. After keeping ng model, remember, every text box, that means this value, whatever they entered, they must be stored in the memory of browser itself. In the memory of browser. We are not trying to use controller, directly browser memory. Then we need to create a reference with hash. It will allocate memory in browser. With which name? Name. By the name, it will allocate memory in the browser, not in the component. In the browser, it will allocate memory. And who have to access that memory and use it? Who have to access and use it? ng model. Now, another important, this is what we define. And here I am writing second, same, ng model. What is the reference name for this? Price. And here ng model. And here checkbox. Hash what? Stock. What is it? ng model. NG model. First, we need to define model. What is it? NG model. Okay, now let's go to drop down. Here we need to make it NG model hash. What is it? Shipped to. Shipped to is equal to NG model. NG model. Are these references anywhere there in the controller? No. We just created those references. And see, we want to display here. That means here name. I need to access. You can see the name is available. Name and name have a value. Name value. Name value is the value of that particular element. Similarly, what is that here? We have price. Price have a value. And the stock also value only. But stock value is checked. Checked is true or false. But we have to access by using value. That means here we will define stock dot value is equal to true. Then question mark, it says available. Otherwise it says out of stock. Okay, shipped to. Shipped to also we need to define. We need to define here shipped to dot what value. Now, is there any reference for them in the controller? No. Everything is defined in the view. And observe carefully here. I am entering the data and it is updated. It is working fine. Same. That means no more controller. Now you created a reference inside the view itself. That is why model is keeping the data in the view itself. Model is not using controller. It is keeping the data in view, updating from the view. That is why it is called as view model. This is MVVM, model, view, model. That means we don't need a controller now. That means in the controller, there is nothing reference created. Nothing. Your controller is empty. Everything is defined in the view. Now for that, only two things you have to define. What is it? NG model. Another one is reference name. That reference name must be handled by model. And we can access the values by using which reference value. So what is MVVM approach? That means what is the concept of this MVVM approach? This is actually MVVM. So it is an software architectural pattern. It is also software architectural pattern. So model, view and view model. Model, view model. What is the advantage of this is model configures memory in view and uses the memory for data. That means you don't need the use of controller for handling data updates. You don't need the use of controller for handling data updates. So, and for handling this, same NG model will manage. So MVVM. NG model only will manage MVVM. How it will manage? Syntactically, we have to write like this. Input type is text. First, we have to mark it as NG model. After that, a reference name. What is the reference name? Some name is equal to what? NG model. That's it. If you want to access, actually, every view model object contains lot of properties. Every mu model contains lot of properties. Actually, this name contains lot of properties like value. It will have like pristine. It will have like dirty. It will have like valid. It will have like invalid. So it will have like touched. So it will have like untouched, like this. Untouched, like this. So many properties will be there. All other properties you will learn later. Currently, in order to access what is the value inside it, which one is required for us? Value. It is not just value. Every model, view model contains lot of properties. We have like pristine, like dirty, like valid, like invalid, like touched. These are used later. Later when you learn about validations and all, we will discuss. Initially, this is the concept of defining and working with a view model, right? This is the view model. Example I will give here. That means how you can bind any location. You can use a binding expression, name dot what? Value. Name dot value. So technically, how to use pristine, dirty, what does that means? You will learn. Pristine means it is not modified. Dirty means it is modified. Valid means all validations passed. Like, what are the validations for text box? In HTML, what validations you can give for text box? What validations you can give for text box in HTML? We can give validations like required. We can give like min length. You can give like max length. Max length. You can give like pattern. You know, na? These are all validation attributes. And if you give these validation attributes, are they valid or invalid also? It can verify. Earlier, to verify validations, we need to write a lot of logic. But now this simple concept is enough that you will learn. Validation separately we will see. But this is the approach of what? MVVM. So in this, there is nothing to do in controller. Only one file you need. What is it? Data binding dot component dot HTML. There is nothing to do in controller. Everything you have to manage here only. But very important, there are several drawbacks now. Of course, you cannot ask anywhere that which one is best. Right? Which one is best? We decide according to situation and requirements. Suppose you are using this MVVM approach, everything is configured in the view, then view becomes heavy. View becomes heavy. It will be slow in rendering. It is not fast. Why it is not fast? Because everything in UI. That means view rendering will be slow down. It will be taking more time in showing you output. So controller advantage is it will process everything and send to view. View is lightweight. View contains only design, but here it contains reference and design. Reference, logic, design, everything you are maintaining in view. It's very heavy. Another problem is it is hard for extending. You want extensions, so you want testing, unit testing. It is difficult because separation issues are there. Here, markup, logic, everything present in one place. If logic and markup and reference all present in one place, separating issues will be there. Testing issues will be there. But this is good if you need any component which doesn't require regular extensions and which doesn't require, because you are reducing the use of one file, controller file. That means initial load time will improve now. Already we know if number of requests increase, page load time will increase. If you are using inline technique, where everything is present in one file, then better you use this kind of mechanism. That depends on requirement. Nobody can say which one is best. That depends on the requirement. So you have seen two-way binding in two ways. Two-way binding can be done by using two types of approaches. What is that? MVC approach and MVVM. In MVC approach, you need a reference in the controller. Everything comes to controller, from there it is updated. But in MVVM, you can directly configure references in the view, and we can manage directly from the view model, right? This is what we need to understand with the data binding. We call this concept as data binding, right? Now in data binding, more complex examples we will see how to handle them, directives and all, how to manage. That we'll see in next session. Tomorrow, this is enough, right? First, you need to practice all this, right? If you practice both techniques of MVC, MVVM, then tomorrow we will go more in depth, more complex things we will learn, right? Tomorrow we'll continue, okay? Right.